Honourable members, I have received correspondence from the member for Arnhem as follows. I propose for discussion this day the following definite matter of public importance. 57 people have lost their lives on Territory roads in 2024, which is set to become one of our worst road fatality years on record. It is critical that the government continues to invest in road safety initiatives and infrastructure to keep Territorians safe on our roads. The letter is signed by the member for Arnhem. Is discussion supported? Discussion is supported. I call the member for Arnhem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to discuss the matter of great importance to our Territory community, and that is the devastating impact of road accidents on Territory roads, Territory families and Territory individuals, and this cannot be overstated. Madam Speaker, this year alone to date, 57 Territory lives have been lost on our roads, a staggering average of 1 life lost per week in the Northern Territory. These numbers represent more than just statistics. They represent mothers, fathers, children, grandparents, friends, neighbours, colleagues.
Please take your seat, Leader of the Opposition. Sorry, what's your point of order?
Madam Speaker, for an MPI, it normally requires 4 people to support that before it can proceed in the chamber.
Can I have some advice on that from the Deputy Clerk, please?
Rally the troops, quick.
You need 4. Okay.
Madam Speaker, there's 4 of us here. We could just support it.
That was my omission. I should have picked up on that. I apologise to the government for not ensuring that the Leader of Opposition had the support of the required number of members. Given that she has the support now, you can continue. Leader of Opposition business. Once again, I apologise.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today I rise to discuss a matter of great importance to our community. The devastating impact of road accidents on Territory families cannot be overstated. This year alone, 57 lives have been lost on our Territory roads, Madam Speaker. This is a staggering average of 1 life lost per week in the Northern Territory. These numbers represent more than just statistics. They represent mothers, fathers, children, grandparents, friends, cousins, neighbours, colleagues who will never return home. The true figure is likely even higher, as some unfortunate fatalities experienced in the Territory this year, such as those experienced on cattle roads and farms, may not be included in the official Territory road toll because they have occurred on private property. Madam Speaker, it is time that we acknowledge that road accidents have a profound impact on our Territory community. Each week, a family has been torn apart, colleagues devastated in the wake of community shake-up, and life has been lost due to what is unfortunately often avoidable accidents on our road. Madam Speaker, the Territory Labor opposition believes that our place as parliamentary leaders in this chamber is a responsibility to ask, what more can we all do to prevent these tragedies and the tragic loss of life on Territory roads? What actions can we do to protect Territorians and create safer road user culture across the NT? While there is no single solution to this complex issue, we must be ambitious in our approach. Indeed, a life lost every week is certainly worth preserving and fighting for. Madam Speaker, over the past decade, an average of 40 people in the Territory have died. Approximately 470 have suffered serious injuries on Territory roads each year. The per capita road fatalities the rate in the Northern Territory is 3.2 times the national rate of the highest in Australia. When we were in government, Madam Speaker, Territory Labor developed a number of road safety action plans to reduce road trauma in the Northern Territory. Territory Labor developed these plans in consultation with key stakeholders like NT Police.
Sorry.
I think he just muted it.
Oh. Sorry.
Territory Labor developed these plans
Not
in
having a good
consultation with
afternoon.
key stakeholders like the Northern Territory Police Force, our local government councils and Paech First Nations groups and advocates. Madam Speaker, from our consultations, the Towards Zero 2018-2022 action plan was established. The work that was done was important in order to highlight the facts and several simple changes that could be made to make a difference in the long term for road safety in the Northern Territory. As part of this previous action plan, Madam Speaker, Territory Labor introduced a blood alcohol concentration limit for supervising drivers. We increased maximum penalties for failure to undertake a breath or saliva test when asked by police. We increased police powers to give breath or saliva tests, and we started drug testing in drivers in 2020. So, Madam Speaker, in 2021, what if the Brandon Wilson story was released? Madam Speaker, the Brandon Wilson story details the tragic and avoidable loss of life through road trauma of a young man on a remote Territory road in August 2018. Presented by Karl Stevanovich, this powerful yet highly emotive 30-minute documentary featured interviews with Brandon's family, friends, his teammates, workmates and first responders. It showed how his death had affected everyone around him, Madam Speaker, and how it could possibly have been avoided simply by taking 2 seconds to put on the life-saving seatbelt. When the NT Motor Accident Compensation Commission also launched the Always Wear Your Seatbelt campaign in 2019. Over the last 10 years, Madam Speaker, 33% of all fatalities on Territory roads involves people not wearing a seatbelt. Seatbelts reduce the chance of injury or death in a vehicle collision by 10 to 80%, Madam Speaker, depending on the type of collision that is experienced. It is very tragic, Madam Speaker, that drivers and passengers and pedestrians that are killed on road accidents, the accident is twice as likely to occur when people are not wearing a seatbelt as other Australians tend to do. Madam Speaker, we know that motorcyclists face a very different challenge to communities in cars and in larger vehicles like buses. And what we look at, Madam Speaker, is this. In 2019, legislation was amended to require a learner motorbike rider licensed to ride a moped or a scooter. Madam Speaker, lane filtering regulations in motorcyclists were introduced in 2019. A media campaign, Dress for the Ride and the Slide, to promote the wearing of protective motorcycle clothing was released in 2022. Likewise, for cyclists, Madam Speaker, Territory Labor focused on building 11 more kilometres of shared path across the Territory, including construction of shared paths on Herbert Heritage Drive to the Alice Springs Telegraph Station, Stott Terrace, Garamella Boulevard, Andulia Road, Chungwa Terrace and Van Allen Drive in Darwin. Madam Speaker, around 160 school visits delivered bike safety theory and bike safety practical sessions in schools at the Newland Park Bicycle Centre in Alice Springs and also in the Parap Road Safety Centre here in Darwin. In 2019, the 1 metre rule for overtaking cyclists was introduced. The road rules were made to amend to ensure that a permitted cyclist to ride slowly across a pedestrian crossing without dismounting. Madam Speaker, to some in this House, there could be seemingly trivial things to have done, but if it helped just one life be saved or one accident or severe injury being experienced, then it has all the more been worth it. To prevent another life lost in our roads, Madam Speaker, is something we should all consider in this place. We know that one of the most effective ways to prevent road accidents is by investing in our roads, Madam Speaker, to ensure that they are safer. That's why we invested heavily in the roads That's why we invested heavily in the Territory's road infrastructure network, including a $203 million road safety program, including shoulder widening, ceiling and culvert extensions, installing guardrail barriers, audio tactile edge lining, intersection upgrades, truck parking bays, variable message signings and street lighting. Also, the investment into upgrades to seal standard on various sections of the Tanami Road, the Central Lunham Highway, Port Keats Road, Maryvale Road, Litchfield Park Road, Gunpoint Road, Keep River Road, and the Jukaroo Road, and the Plenty, Roper and Buntine highways. Upgrades to 2-lane seal standard on various sections of the Carpentaria, Tablelands and Buntine highways, as well as the Roper Highway. Construction of new bridges on Port Keats Road, Keep River Road, Litchfield Park Road, the Arnhem Highway and the Roper Highway to improve flood immunity, and construction of Tiger Brennan Drive and Berrima Road intersection overpass to improve road safety and traffic flow. Construction of the Truck Central Transport Hub in Darwin to assist with the management of driver fatigue. 28 variable message signs displayed on road safety and tragic messages across the Northern Territory. The work undertaken helped contribute to the downward trend of road fatalities in the Territory, and that's why when Labor was in government, we launched a new Towards Zero Road Safety Action Plan from 2024 to 2028. Madam Speaker, Territory Labor consulted far and wide on the updated action plan that was released. The consultation identified strong support for actions targeting alcohol and drug use while driving, and actions encouraging seatbelt and child restraint use. Actions related to speed and road safety cameras received less support. However, increased enforcement targeting unregistered and unlicensed driving was highly supported, as well as improving overtaking opportunities on the Stewart Highway. Madam Speaker, there was a high level of support for the ongoing upgrades and developments of shared path networks right across the Territory, and I urge the new CLP government to maintain this strategy and the associated actions that will end up saving lives on our Territory roads. It is important that the new government continues to invest in culturally appropriate education and awareness campaigns and programs such as Who's Your Sober Bob, Enough's Enough Drink Driving, and also Sorry Business Stories around drink driving. Madam Speaker, the new government should also continue to work with addressing pedestrian fatalities. So unfortunately, we've seen a lot more of these occur, particularly this year. These incidents represent around 19% of the lives lost on our Territory roads. The majority of pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries occur in our urban areas of Darwin, Palmerston and Alice Springs. It is important, Madam Speaker, that the CLP government continue to roll out infrastructure upgrades to improve pedestrian safety, including the use of innovative technology solutions such as alerting drivers of the presence of pedestrians and allowing increased time for pedestrians to cross the road at signalled intersections. Madam Speaker, this work also includes the installation of speed check signs in school zones. We also urge the CLP government to consider upgrading road safety signage on regional and remote roads targeting seatbelts, driving to conditions and other key road safety messages, providing funding to local governments to develop local area traffic management plans, reviewing and increasing overtaking lanes on the Stewart Highway between Darwin and Katherine, as well as from Katherine to the Carpentaria Highway intersections. Upgrading road networks, lighting infrastructure with smart controller lighting technology, and investing in technology-based solutions to increase compliance with speed limits at road work sites and ensuring that people adhere to those dropped speeding zones. Madam Speaker, the above steps are relatively simple and, as I've outlined, supported by the general community. The loss of life on our roads can be deeply tragic. One loss is horrible, horrific, traumatic, and deeply tragic, Madam Speaker, but 57 is even more unbearable. When we have the discussion around road safety, Madam Speaker, and the investment in infrastructure, this is something that can be life-saving, as we said, Madam Speaker. Every year, I feel like a broken record in this place, Madam Speaker, and for the 8 years that I've been a member of Parliament, every single final sittings, I always urge people to stay safe on our roads, particularly now with the wet season. Put your headlights on. Easy things to do to show visibility and to create more safety for other road users as well, Madam Speaker. We know with our torrential and monsoonal rains across the top end in particular, but as well as other parts of the territory, the visibility of vehicles, buses, vans, road trains, cars, motorbikes and cyclists can completely disappear from visibility, Madam Speaker. And that's where a lot of road users who are not experienced or perhaps in a rush, where we can see some of those devastating accidents, not just around injuries, but sometimes, unfortunately, fatalities on the road. I myself, Madam Speaker, was a first responder to an accident where a 7-year-old family member from Numbulwar died on the road, 40 kilometres out, and I was the first vehicle to come across that accident. And it has traumatised me for the last 9 years. So my work and my advocacy, Madam Speaker, around road safety will continue, particularly now in opposition, to make sure that every territory life that can be saved or every territory accident that can be avoided is done so, because we as a territory, and particularly in this chamber, can come together to focus on something that encourages safe, educated and unpressured road use in the territory, and particularly around infrastructure, around driving to conditions, around avoiding blatantly stupid activity like drink driving and drug use driving, Madam Speaker. These are messages I'll continue for the next 4 years, and I hope in some way, shape or form they can make a small impact. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to our police and emergency service workforce for their tireless efforts in keeping our roads safe and saving lives of Territorians and visitors to the Territory. Their dedication and expertise have been instrumental in reducing road toll over the past few decades, but we need to support them. Madam Speaker, we also acknowledge the invaluable feedback that they provide to governments, to opposition, to independents, informing that critical road safety strategies and shaping the messages to be safer and more sensible on our roads. Madam Speaker, we must also recognise the profound impact that repeated exposure of traumatic road accidents can have on our police, emergency and frontline service workers. The cumulative stress, anxiety and depression that can result from attending multiple fatalities, crashes, can be debilitating for our frontline service workers, affecting their mental health and their physical well-being. Madam Speaker, it is essential that we provide our police and emergency service workers with access to counselling, peer support, mental health resources to mitigate the effects of trauma and stress that they see every day, that many people in the Territory may only see once in a lifetime. Madam Speaker, I believe, and my team believes, that by promoting a culture of safety, resilience and wellbeing within our emergency service organisations, that we can better support our personnel and minimise the impact of traumatic events in the medium and long term for our frontline workers. Ultimately, safety on our roads is a shared responsibility, Madam Speaker, and as we approach the holiday season, hasn't officially started yet, Madam Speaker, I urge all road users to exercise caution and care and experience and patience when driving on our Territory roads or when using our Territory roads as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, Madam Speaker. Let's ensure that the work that we can do in this place and outside of this place will ensure that this Christmas and holiday season is filled with joy on our roads and not sorrow. We owe it to fellow Territorians, we owe it to our loved ones in the communities that we represent and our communities who use our road every day in different ways, that together, regardless of politics, we can make the difference to create safer, more responsible road user culture for all Territorians. And Madam Speaker, this is an area of deep emotional concern for me, as well as I've said, the work that we see day in and day out by those emergency responders. We want to see the end of the year. We've got 5 weeks left of the end of the calendar year. We do not want to see that horrible number of 57 lives lost on Territory roads increase. We're already at a horrible, horrible over average of the numbers experienced in previous years, and it's never good enough to have one road death, but when we're thinking about one death every week in the Territory, the amount of families and friends and constituents that have been impacted over the year, and as I've mentioned, Madam Speaker, the year is not over yet, but over the 11 months of the year, it is deeply traumatic for our communities that we represent to see deaths on our roads. So if we can encourage, by any way, shape or form, small acts that can make a big difference for safety, road safety, this is absolutely worth it. And from a bush member's perspective, Madam Speaker, we know that when road users take unnecessary risks, like crossing flooded creeks, roads, rivers, that also creates unsafe situation for the driver, the passengers, and also those rescue teams and those emergency workers that unfortunately put their lives at risk when people have made, quite frankly, stupid decisions to cross. So please, please, particularly this wet season, if it's flooded, forget it. Think about your families. Try and think about yourself, but think about all the people that it may impact when you make a split decision that is not in your safety, your best interest of your safety, the passengers in your vehicle or travelling with you, and those frontline emergency service workers. So road safety is everyone's business, Madam Speaker, and I think it's pertinent to put on the record as a matter of public importance. Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, road safety is incredibly important. So tonight's matter of public importance highlights the fact that we have had an incredibly tragic year with 57 lives lost on our roads compared to 31 in the same time last year. An astonishing almost doubling of the fatalities. And it's really distressing that 72% of those fatalities have involved alcohol or drugs on the road. 57 lives, representing 37 males and 20 females. 15 of those lives have been pedestrians. And despite these high numbers, our police are out there taking enforcement action, being proactive on our roads to try and send a very clear message that if you do the wrong thing on our roads, you will be caught. And I'd like to thank our police. This year alone, they've conducted over 100,000 breath tests, which is an incredible number. And 77.6% of those returned a positive reading. They've also been doing a number of other traffic infringements, majority of which include speeding. And there is an operation happening as we head into Christmas, Operation Angove, which really targets that December-January period before we move back into school at the end of January in the new year. And so the numbers speak for themselves, Madam Speaker, and it's really about three key areas that need to be looked at. One is around personal responsibility. So when we talk about people distracted driving, drug and alcohol driving, taking excessive risks, like what the opposition leader has been talking about with taking the chance crossing a river, thinking it won't happen to you. This all comes down to personal responsibility and making the right decisions on behalf of yourselves, your family, and people you don't know, other road users as well. It comes down to enforcement, and we know that over many years our police have been stretched to the very limits of the policing they've been able to do, let alone proactive policing. And certainly over the COVID period, I think there was quite a few years there where, seeing a breatho was nearly non-existent. So there has been a lot of work being done this year, and I thank our police for that. And it doesn't all rest with them. It's a component, absolutely, because if people don't think they are going to get caught, they're more likely to engage in that risky behaviour. But enforcement is an important part, and equally education, so making sure our kids understand their responsibilities when they're getting behind a wheel, their responsibilities to others, the danger, and that one split second of distraction or that lack of attention to what's going on around you or impairment because of influences of other things is all it takes to end in absolute catastrophic tragedy. And again, time and time again, we've seen too many, but this year is just an unprecedented level, particularly when you compare it to last year. The opposition leader is absolutely correct in acknowledging the trauma this has on the people left behind and on our emergency workers, not just families and friends, but on the emergency workers who time and time again are cutting people out of cars, resuscitating, doing everything they can to save life. It takes an absolutely enormous toll on them and their team, and they have to get back up and do it again. And in recent time, we've had successive deaths very close together, sometimes entire families. And you can only imagine the trauma associated with that. So, Madam Speaker, we will continue that work. Of course, safe roads is another component of it, but the data really shows that alcohol and drugs are the main cause. We talk a lot about the fatal five, so alcohol and drugs, speed, seat belts, inattention and fatigue. They are the main causes of fatalities on our roads. They're the ones police continue to target. We've seen them infringe hundreds of Territorians for distracted driving, nearly 1,000 for not wearing their seatbelt, which is really quite incredible to think that in this day and age, police have fined nearly 1,000 Territorians this year for not wearing a seatbelt. You imagine all the people then who aren't wearing a seatbelt that the police don't get to catch. And I think growing up in an era where we've always had to wear seatbelts, I think it's hard for someone of my generation to understand that concept because it's ingrained in us. And I know it myself. You turn the car on, you put the kids jump in the back and they'll say straight away to me, "Mum, my seatbelt." Before you've even moved anywhere out of the garage, they're straight onto it. It's just built into them, which is wonderful. And so again, something as simple as that restraint, it's in every single car. There's no excuse for not doing that. It comes back to that personal responsibility and making sure that people are doing the right thing. Speeding, nearly 50,000 people fined for speeding this year. Again, think of all the times people are speeding where the police aren't able to catch them. And so we'll continue to do what we can. And of course, this new Operation Angove, over the Christmas period is designed to have that hypervigilance, that high visibility policing. And we certainly hope people take stock of what it is they're risking, what it is they're putting on the line. Every time you get in a car, it can be a lethal weapon. This is a high-powered, machine that, if used in the wrong way, can cause incredible carnage. And so it has to be respected. The road rules have to be respected. The shared space needs to be respected, and people do need to have the patience and the time with one another whilst using our roads. So, Madam Speaker, it is of utmost importance that people continue to drive safely, drive to the conditions. We're coming into our wet season. There's increase in rain, there's lower visibility, roads could be slippery, particularly out bush. 70% of the Territory's roads are dirt. And so if you're travelling in our regions, that risk is just increases exponentially. Wet dirt roads, flooded roads, muddy roads, boggy roads, all have an additional risk element to them. So don't take the risk. Be smart about what you're doing, plan ahead. Look after your mates. These are all messages that have been drummed into us since, almost the day we were born. And yet for some, they still are not heeding that important warning. Our police do an incredible job, and the toll is very, very high. And our focus on wellbeing has been enhanced over a period of time, but something that's not lost on me that we need to continue to work on to make sure that as that demand increases, so too do the scars that our first responders carry with them. It's not just our police, it's our ambulance, our nurses, our doctors. So I thank our police coming up to Operation Angove. Of course, over Christmas, emergency workers continue to work. People, they don't get to have the time off that others might be able to enjoy with their family and friends. They're out on the road making sure that our family and friends are safe, and we thank them wholeheartedly for their service. It is a tragic outcome for this year, and I certainly hope next year will be different. But we must all continue to make sure that education piece is there for our young people and new drivers, that we reinforce the importance of personal responsibility, and that our police are well supported to be able to enforce the law, to send a very clear message that if you do the wrong thing, you will be caught.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the opposition for bringing this to the chamber today. As we've heard, we know that this year 57 lives have been lost on our roads, nearly double the number from the same time last year, and we also know that an average of 500 people are seriously injured in road accidents in the Northern Territory every year. For many of us, this is not just a statistic, it's deeply personal. These are our loved ones, our families, friends and neighbours. I'm one of those people. I lost a treasured family member at just 16 with her whole life ahead of her, killed in a road accident. Lucy was a beautiful, vibrant, amazing young woman, and her death was tragic and meaningless. Her life was over, and the impact of her death was far-reaching throughout her friends and family. At that time, and almost every day since, I reflect on the incredible danger of our roads, and the death toll in the Northern Territory remains deeply shocking to me. And like everyone in this territory, I'm committed to working to care for our community and to ensure that we're doing everything we can to keep people safe. Our road toll is horrific. There must be more that we can do. And as we've heard, the toll is not just on those who are hurt or killed or those who lose family members, but also on the first responders who do an incredibly challenging job, and I thank them and our health services and all those services who care for those harmed on the road. We know what the main causes of road death are: speeding, alcohol and not wearing seatbelts. And it's of great concern that while alcohol is a key factor in many road crashes, the government is proposing that we make alcohol more accessible by reducing the floor price. And we must continue to address alcohol-related harm, including its devastating impact on our road toll. We know that young people, particularly those under 25, and communities in rural and remote areas are among the hardest hit. And tragically, First Nations Territorians are disproportionately affected, with 86% of fatal pedestrian crashes in the past 10 years involving Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander pedestrians. I just want to come back to alcohol for a minute. It's well established that the Northern Territory has the highest per capita consumption of alcohol in Australia, the highest rate of risky alcohol consumption in Australia, and the nation's highest rate of alcohol-related hospitalisations and high rates of road trauma and mortality involving illegal blood alcohol concentration levels. I'm just quoting from some research from Menzies, and further to that, in 2015, alcohol-related road crashes were estimated to have cost the Northern Territory economy more than $57 million through permanent disability, workforce disruption, insurance and compensation schemes, and loss of quality of life. Substantial societal gains can be made through the prevention of drink and drug driving. We need a clear and consistent approach. That means investing in safer roads, as we've heard, targeted education campaigns and stricter enforcement of road rules. But it also means being honest about the decisions that we make in this chamber around other things that affect road death, and that includes alcohol policy. If we know alcohol is contributing to these tragedies, we cannot turn a blind eye for the sake of convenience or politics. We cannot accept that losing life on our roads is just part of life here. It's preventable, and it's up to us to act. Let's make sure that whatever laws we make in this chamber will make all of us safer and ensure no more families have to endure this heartbreak. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also have statement to read from the member from Mulka.
Sure.
The member for Mulka asks that I share this statement today. He says, I'm not sure how many members in this chamber have lost family members and loved ones on the NT roads, but there are a great many people dying and being injured on our roads in the Northern Territory, and many families and communities who are impacted. And we hear very little about these deaths. We do not hear an outcry from government about new policies or spending announcements to create safety. We do not see the same call to action they have for crime. My wawa, my cousin brother, who was hit on the Stewart Highway by 2 cars, one that stopped and one that didn't. He was in Darwin for a medical appointment. He was a treasured member of our family, a kind and quiet man. I had hoped to give him a lift home at the end of the Parliament sitting, and I felt I had failed him because I could not deliver him home safely. These pedestrian deaths are concerning, and the government should be calling an inquiry to look for ways in which to limit deaths on our roads. Madam Speaker, last term of Parliament I asked the Minister for the hit and run statistics. In the 21-22 financial year, there are 11 hit and runs that resulted in deaths and 4 that caused serious harm. In 2022-23, there were 4 hit and runs resulting in deaths and 2 that caused serious harm. In 2023-24, there are 11 hit and runs resulting in deaths and 10 that caused serious harm. These are not the total numbers of deaths on our roads. These are just the ones where the driver has hit a pedestrian and did not stop, which is a serious concern because it leaves people on our roads who have injuries that need immediate attention. My wawa was one of those people because the first driver did not stop. Is there a chance that if that first driver had stopped, my wawa would be alive today? Could the first driver have stopped the second car from hitting him? In Brinken, on 2 occasions this year, 3 people were struck by cars that did not stop, and on each occasion, 2 people passed away. Why would a driver not assist the people they had hit? These questions lead you to ask whether it is intentional. This is a shocking crime, and yet there is not a flurry of bills on urgency passing through the chamber. For some reason, these deaths are acceptable, but to the families and communities, the people of my electorate, these deaths are completely unacceptable. They require a response from government about how this has happened and how our communities can be made safer so that we don't continue to experience this loss. Mr. Gwoja goes on to say, I am grateful that the opposition has raised this issue today, and I hope that the government will call in experts and consult with communities to address the tragedy that we are seeing on our roads, the tragedy that deserves an urgent response. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Goyder.
Madam Speaker, I rise to add my contribution to this matter of public importance. Madam Speaker, I want to talk briefly about a young man who sadly lost his life on our roads this year. On the 8th of June this year, Thomas Van Turen passed away after a fatal crash on the Arnhem Highway. Thomas was 20 years old and on his way to work that fateful morning. He died on the side of the road in the presence of friends who had stopped to assist and who comforted him while he took his last breath. A memorial was erected at the site of this crash, which my partner and his fellow colleagues, who loved him like a brother, have to drive past every day on the way to and from work. Thomas was a keen fisherman, a hard worker, and a wonderful human being. Thomas was a friend, a partner, a brother, a grandson, a nephew, and a cousin. Most importantly, Madam Speaker, Thomas had his whole life ahead of him. He had dreams, he had plans, and plenty of fishing trips that he should have had many more years to undertake. I attended his funeral earlier this year, and Madam Speaker, if every driver in the Northern Territory could see the grief, heartbreak and the effects that his death had had on his friends, family, colleagues and former schoolmates at St Joseph's Nudgee College, they would take our road toll seriously. Madam Speaker, Thomas is not just another statistic, and neither are any of the 56 other men, women and children who have lost their lives on our roads. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Member for Namatjira.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak to this very important matter of public importance. And I do actually thank the opposition for bringing this topic to the chamber today. And since becoming a minister, road safety sits in one of my portfolios, and it's something I certainly take very seriously. And of course, over the last 10 years, Mr Deputy Speaker, on average 40 people have lost their lives on Territory roads each year. And of course, we all know that one life lost on our roads is of course one too many. And tragically, we've already lost 57 lives on Territory roads this year, and of course it's well above a decade average, and at the same time last year we'd only lost 31, and it's very hard to hear the stories of those close personal friends that we've heard about here today from the member for Johnston and of course the member for Goyder. But Mr Deputy Speaker, that's 57 people who didn't make it home, 57 people whose family and friends have had their lives turned upside down. It's teenagers who don't make it home to their parents and parents who don't make it home to their children. And the effect of each major accident extends well beyond the victim and their families and friends. And as it's been mentioned here today, Mr Deputy Speaker, it affects our first responders, our police, those heroes in our community, our paramedics and firefighters, who are some of the ones that are first on these confronting scenes dealing with that personal tragedy. And every death and major injury on our roads are felt right across our community. And these statistics, Mr Deputy Speaker, are confronting, and the stories we're hearing from those on the ground are absolutely frightening. Just in September, we lost 2 teenagers in less than 24 hours in separate incidents in Dheran and Katherine. And Mr Deputy Speaker, the NT currently holds the unfortunate record of the highest road toll per capita anywhere in Australia at more than 3 times the national rate. And I'd like to speak, I suppose, of some of my personal experiences living in a territory for the time that I have and doing a lot of bush work and having a remote electorate. I spend a lot of time on the roads. I'm out all over the place, driving all over the place, like many in this chamber have done. And I can't begin to count the amount of times that unfortunately I've come across vehicle accidents out in the bush, on some of our remote roads and on our national highways. And most recently, a few years back at I think it was New Year's Eve, on my way to Yalara to spend New Year's Eve there, coming across a single vehicle rollover, thankfully which didn't end in tragedy but was serious injuries for the 2 young men involved. And that's part of, I suppose, our issue is we have people who are not used to our road conditions, not used to some of the longer distances. And as the leader of the, as the Chief Minister has said, 70% plus of our roads are unsealed. And just in a recent road transport forum with other ministers across the country, they were talking about the quality of their roads, and they're talking about Class 1 and Class 2 roads. Well, unfortunately, Mr Deputy Speaker, most of our roads don't even meet Class 3. And that, again, certainly adds to some of the difficulties when driving all around the territory. But road safety, Mr Deputy Speaker, is certainly multifaceted. The government knows that to reach our targets we must invest in education. We also need to invest in law enforcement and strong road infrastructure. And it's only recently, I think within the last few weeks, Mr Deputy Speaker, I met with some proponents around looking at how we're delivering our road safety message, particularly to our remote and regional areas. We have those campaigns that run in town, the Sober Bob campaigns and other things, but what we haven't done well is be able to get that message out into our remote communities and out to our regional areas. And the difficulty is in doing it, Mr Deputy Speaker, because not everybody has television out there, not everybody has radio, people don't get newspapers, so it's about how we work to deliver those all-important road safety messages out into our remote and rural locations. And the people I've been talking to run an Aboriginal media organisation and looking at ways that how we may deliver better messaging out into the bush so people are aware of those 5 key issues that are driving our road toll. First and foremost being alcohol and drugs. Secondly is speed. Thirdly, people not wearing seatbelts. I still can't believe in this day and age that people aren't wearing seatbelts. Distraction is another key. It seems mobile phones are playing their part now in the road toll right across the country, and of course fatigue, and that is particularly pertinent to people utilising roads here in the Northern Territory, because we do face that tyranny of distance. But we need to use the territory-specific data we have gathered when identifying target areas for improvement in dealing with our road toll. And from that data, it's clear that education initiatives are the biggest piece of the puzzle, which is what I've just spoken about. Because the statistics show that the overwhelming majority of the fatalities on our road this year are the direct result of poor, reckless and/or illegal behaviour on our roads. And the Chief Minister spoke about personal responsibility and good decisions, and sadly that's what is not taking place, unfortunately, in the majority of incidents revolving around deaths on our roads. And I was recently provided, through my role as the Minister for Infrastructure Logistics, the most recent coronial investigations into 3 recent road deaths. And in those 3 tragic accidents, alcohol and speed was a component in each one of those, and in one where there was multi-fatalities, it was the lack of wearing seatbelts. So it's about how we get that message out to people to start generating that knowledge within individuals and their families and friends to make those good decisions and make those right decisions, and take responsibility for their actions of personal responsibility for their actions, but also to help other people who are looking to make bad decisions when travelling on our roads, because it's not just themselves, unfortunately, Mr Deputy Speaker, that they may affect, it's other road users and people who may be travelling with them. But Mr Speaker, the number of people in the Territory who are getting behind the wheel while affected by alcohol and/or drugs is absolutely disgraceful. And I thank the police for their tireless work and dedication to identifying and prosecuting offenders on our road network who are not obeying the rules. Because alcohol and other drugs are by far the biggest cause of fatalities on our roads, and they are responsible for 72% of this year's fatal crashes, 80% of pedestrian fatalities, 32% was speeding, was part of the main factor, and 18% was for not wearing a seatbelt. And Mr Deputy Speaker, research shows wearing a seatbelt doubles your chances of survival in a serious crash. It's standard practice now. Gone are the days when you're in your old Holden and if you're lucky you had a lap sash seatbelt, and way back in the day seatbelts weren't compulsory, but now with modern vehicles everything has a seatbelt fitted to the car, yet Territorians are failing to wear them. These behaviours are also, Mr Deputy Speaker, not done in isolation. The data shows a link between the failure to wear seatbelts when involved in a crash with other dangerous behaviours, including speed, drugs and alcohol. So many lives, Mr Deputy Speaker, have been lost to this reckless behaviour on our roads, and it's not just the perpetrator who falls victim. As I've said, unsafe driving behaviours affect everyone on the roads, not just the person behind the wheel. It affects passengers, cyclists, pedestrians and other drivers. And what is most concerning, Madam Speaker, in our road toll this year are the 15 pedestrian deaths that have happened that are, in most cases, possibly avoidable. I know in speaking to the department after some recent fatalities involving pedestrians, there is work being done to implement specific lighting that can track movement, so that in some of those possibly lower lit areas where it is known that pedestrians utilise road crossings, that there is a visual change when people are on the road to highlight to motorists that there may be people crossing the road. That is just one of the things that are being discussed with the department. We have applications into the federal government currently to assist with dealing with our road network and road safety. We've put bids in recently. We're hoping to see the outcome of those bids in the very, very near future. And being so small and the difficulties we have in funding this, we need that assistance from the federal government to be able to provide those safety requirements across our road network. But one of the other solutions, Madam Speaker, is the investment in education and law enforcement to drive behavioural change. And the Chief Minister spoke about the amount of police roadside breath tests, which is great to see, and it goes a long way to pushing that deterrent for drinking and driving and making people aware that the police are out there and that if you do this, you will be caught. Madam Speaker, the Territory Government is committed to investing in and delivering stronger road safety education programs. And I said, I've tasked the department with looking at alternative ways now on how we can better engage with the community on those road safety messaging and look at the messaging that we've been doing previous to see if it actually has been effective and whether we can specifically and deliberately develop messaging for different regions of the Northern Territory. So rather than try and roll out one simple message across all of our communities, is look at ways that we may be able to put messaging into language to be able to deliver it into different parts of the Northern Territory so we can get more effective education about the effects of course, those fatal five, as they call it, which is alcohol and drugs, speeding, seatbelts, distraction and, of course, fatigue. But we'll continue to deliver the current suite of education and awareness campaigns. As I said, like Who's Your Sober Bob, Enough is Enough, drink driving and sorry business stories for drink driving. And I know there's a gentleman in Central Australia, Christopher Brocklebank, who's done quite a lot of work in this space through his business called I Talk Libraries, and he's able to develop messaging that is in language that is easily understood and is accessible by many, many people. And I know the work that Christopher has been doing has certainly helped a number of communities. So that's another way to be able to deliver that all-important messaging out there into our communities. Because, Madam Speaker, everyone deserves to be safe on our roads. And, Madam Speaker, everybody deserves to make it home to their families. And again, I thank the opposition for bringing on this very important matter of public importance. And I can give my commitment that I said I'm working very, very hard with the department that I'm responsible for to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to improve road safety, to improve our messaging, to deliver better outcomes for the people of the Northern Territory.
Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition for bringing this matter of public importance to the floor of this Assembly today, particularly ahead of the coming festive season, which will get Territorians out and about across the Territory, particularly in the way which we all love to see it, on the road. Madam Speaker, every death on our Territory road is heartbreaking. This year alone, 57 lives have been lost. This is the highest number of lives lost on our roads in over a decade and is nothing short of a tragedy. In the decade between 2012 and 2021, on average, 40 people lost their lives to road accidents, with hundreds suffering serious injuries. There's no way you can cut it, Madam Speaker. Our statistics are worse than any other jurisdiction. The per capita road fatality rate in the Northern Territory is 3.2 times the national rate and the highest in Australia. While over the last 4 decades, our average road crash fatalities have trended downwards, the impact of road trauma is continued to be felt by families, friends, workmates, sport teams, first responders, and the wider community more often than we would like. Being safe on our roads, urban, rural or remote, is paramount, not just for us, but for our families. As a member of the Assembly representing a bush seat, the aspect of driving my vast electorate is of course a privilege, but it also makes me keenly aware of the seriousness of road safety. The fatigue of driving vast distances, the flooding of tracks, the wet season storms disrupting visibility and, most importantly, navigating the unsealed roads leading into our remote communities. This year alone, my electorate of Daly has seen multiple fatal vehicle accidents, with the most recent being near Pine Creek 2 weeks ago. Madam Speaker, this is why I am so heavily focused on infrastructure, particularly our roads. 75% of the Territory's vast 36,000 kilometre road network is unsealed and often subject to extreme weather conditions. 73% of fatal car crashes in the Northern Territory occur on roads in our rural and remote areas, with serious injury sitting at 53%. Madam Speaker, during the October sittings, I called on the CLP government to commit to delivering the $60 million selected upgrades on the Port Keats Road between Gwoja and Palumpa, a very important issue for the constituents of the Daly electorate. Minister Yarn in the House committed to delivering this project. However, I am now hearing from my community that the CLP have scrapped the funding for this project. This is an absolute disgrace, Madam Speaker. This is a project about improving all year-round access, road safety and connectivity, something that the community has been crying out for and you committed to in this House, but have secretly gone out and cut it. Shame. Madam Speaker, during the election campaign, the CLP candidate at the time was also out there promising that the road would continue ahead, even though it was in the budget for the 2023-2024, which included sealing the Port Keats Road between Gwoja and Palumpa. Then we put a question to the minister at the time, and now he couldn't even answer that question at the time. He was fluffing about saying we're going to rejig funding. Then we're now hearing on the ground that that project has been cut. We had the Chief Minister come in here and quote just before in our speech that 70% of our roads are dirt roads and that we need to ensure that we upgrade those roads to make them safer for our families for remote communities, safer for our police, so when they're responding to certain issues, safer for our service providers in the Daly electorate. It's an absolute disgrace to hear that this project may be cut under the country Liberal government. 18% of crashes are on unsealed roads in remote areas and is seen to be an increased trend. Upgrading and sealing roads not only connects the Territory and provides economic growth, but at the heart of the investment is the increase in road safety. Residents of the Daly region deserve to have the ability to drive in and out of their local communities with safe and optimal road conditions. A right which the CLP have thrown to the wayside. Minister Yarn should be upfront with residents of the West Daly region about why his government is abandoning them. All talk, flip-flop action, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the former Territory Labor government is in partnership with the Australian government, saw the importance of delivering the Adelaide River to Gwoja corridor upgrade. The new bridge and raised sealed section of the Port Keats Road delivered by this partnership in 2021 has helped reduce closures during the wet and significantly boosted accessibility to our remote communities. This CLP government is now responsible for delivering on the road upgrades committed by the former Territory Labor government. This includes the $340 million for priority industry roads, the $209 million for Central Arnhem Road upgrades, $189.3 million for upgrades to Plenty Highway as part of the Outback Way corridor, $127.9 million for the Northern Territory National Network, $112.4 million for the Buntai Highway upgrades, $80.3 million for remote and regional roads, $80.1 million for the Tanami Road, $77.7 million for Tiger Brennan and the Berrimah Road intersection, close to $67 million for the Kakadu National Park roads, and $51.8 million upgrades for Tiwi Island roads. But Madam Speaker, I do worry that as we continue to hear about the commitment to cut projects from the CLP government, the Minister has no clear idea of where they might be, that our roads, bush, rural and urban, are the first to go. I'm calling on this CLP government to commit and be transparent with us in the Assembly, that they will not cut the funding investment in any of our territory roads. Because, Madam Speaker, keeping Territorians safe was a key focus of the former Territory Labor government, especially on our roads. This is why, over our 8 years in office, Territory Labor continued to make major investments alongside the Commonwealth into our road infrastructure. This includes shoulder widening and sealing, guardrail upgrades, implementation of audio tactile edge lines, intersection upgrades, and new heavy vehicle parking and lighting improvements, all through the $203 million road safety program. We sealed and upgraded sections of key roads, including Tamanai, Central Arnhem, Port Keats Road, Maryville Road, Litchfield Park Road, Gunpoint Road, Keat River, just to name a few, Madam Speaker. We made upgrades to the sealed standards on various sections of the Carpentaria and Tableland highways. We constructed new bridges on the Keat River Road, Litchfield Park Road and Arnhem Highway and Roper Road. We commenced the Tiger Brennan Drive, Berrimah Road overpass projects will improve road safety outcomes for its user once it opens later this year. On top of that, Madam Speaker, there is also $6 million allocated in the 2024-25 NT budget for future pedestrian road safety infrastructure upgrades where needed. Madam Speaker, while upgrades to road infrastructure are vital to reducing the risk of accidents on our roads, it does make up only one component of what we can do. Throughout our time in government, Territory Labor also looked to the elements of policy, education and enforcement to help reduce the number of lives lost on the roads. In 2018, after consultation with community members and stakeholders, we launched the Towards Zero Road Safety Action Plan 2018-2022. Through this plan, a vision was put forward to zero deaths or accidents on our territory roads and outlined a strategy to get there. The action plan composed of factors that contributed to better road safety outcomes and put forward actions that could create change. Through this action plan, the Northern Territory Government successfully implemented a range of key road safety policy measures. We made the historic decision to abolish the open road speed limit and replace it with a 130km default speed limit on all Territory roads except for the Stewart, Barclay, Victoria and Arnhem highways. Earlier this year in July, the former Chief Minister announced the Towards Zero Road Safety Action Plan 2024-2028, which builds on the success of the 2018-2022 plan. This plan currently sits alongside the National Road Safety Strategy and the National Road Safety Action Plan. I want to thank the Road Safety Roundtables in Darwin and Alice Springs and the community members who provided their input towards this plan. However, Madam Speaker, one thing is for sure, our road safety goals cannot be achieved by government alone. It will continue to take substantial paradigm shift by everyone. Every Territorian must accept that they have a part in creating a safe road culture. Madam Speaker, ahead of the festive season, I ask Territorians to take note of that fatal 5: alcohol, drugs, speed, inattention, fatigue and not wearing seatbelts. We need to slow down, buckle up, drive to the conditions, drive without distractions, and to not drink and drive. Madam Speaker, I would like to take a moment to thank our Territory Police, Fire and Emergency Service workers, our nurses and healthcare workers. They are our first responders to motor vehicle accidents. They are on the other end of the phone when you ring 000. They do invaluable work, and I thank them for the work they continue to do. To all Territorians, this Christmas, let's ensure our loved ones aren't missing due to the preventable accidents on our roads. The best Christmas gift we can give is to ensure that there are no more deaths, no more injuries, and no more accidents on our Territory roads. Thank you, and I commend the motion to the House.
Member for Gwoja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I do rise briefly this evening to contribute to the matter of public importance. It is extremely important to raise this issue in the House. We've heard from all of the honourable members who've contributed to the debate this evening that 57 lives have been lost on Territory roads. That's 57 too many. So, Madam Speaker, it is important to acknowledge that number, 57, represents 57 Territorians, 57 loved ones who are not with us this year. And I want to take the moment to acknowledge that number and acknowledge the families, but certainly I want to acknowledge the Police, Fire and Emergency Services workers who have to attend those situations, often in regional and remote locations. And I want to extend my sincere thanks to our emergency services workers who do an incredible job attending, often in very complex, uncomfortable and horrific conditions, are our emergency services and frontline workers responding to that. So it's important to acknowledge the amazing work that they do. Particularly, I want to acknowledge myself and the Minister, Minister Burgoyne, attended the 25th anniversary of the Uluru Police, Fire and Emergency Services. And I want to acknowledge all of those hard-working fireys down there who often have to attend to a number of incidents on the Lassiter Highway. It's important to just acknowledge that. Madam Speaker, we talk in this place around the reform work and around the ongoing work, but it's also important to acknowledge how far we've come in such a short period of time. Now, I think probably nearly every one of us, barring the member for Goyder, is over 31. So,
I don't know about that.
Oh, well, I mean, who knows, Madam Speaker? But it was only 31 years ago in the Northern Territory that we were riding in the back of utes. I remember that because we grew up in a regional area, we grew up remote. We didn't have a car that was big enough for all of us to fit in, so we used to ride in the back of the ute. And we saw through an increase in fatalities due to people riding in the back of utes and not having roll bars or appropriate restraints to hold people in, that the number and the statistics was exploding. It was really an area that we needed to do something with. And nationally, as a nation, we came together and we introduced a series of reforms, and they were harmonised. And across the country in 1993, particularly here in the Northern Territory, we saw that come into effect where you weren't allowed to ride in the back of the ute anymore. Bring that forward 30 years and there's been a whole range of legislative reform of all governments, of all levels of government, to increase road safety. And sometimes along the way we need to remind people of those important and powerful campaigns. We've heard from members in this chamber around the role that alcohol plays, particularly in motor vehicle accidents. And I remember there was a really bold ad for its time, which was the ad that if you drink and drive, you're a bloody idiot. And that was an ad that absolutely resonated with so many people because we still hear people talking about it today. That brings us forward to where we are today and the need to look at revisiting those promotional campaigns and educational campaigns to do more to raise the awareness on Territory roads. We need to be doing that in language, so that it is in Aboriginal first language, so that it's easy for people to understand and to respond to. And I think, as we have heard from members in this chamber, absolutely we cannot rely on it just being for advertisements on television. And here's why. Because not many people living in remote locations actually have television, because they might not have the vast telecommunications, the black box to access TV. So we need to think outside of that box. We need to be doing these campaigns on social media, on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, to really educate. And they are the portals in which people are engaging and getting information from, as well as radio. Making sure that people have access to hear that on the airwaves is incredibly important. We have heard from members in this place, yes, road fatalities are driven by people drink driving. They are driven as well by, unfortunately, the difficulty in maintaining the Territory's road network. There is something like 16,000 kilometres of roads in the Northern Territory that are not bitumised. They're dirt roads, they're gravel roads, they're roads that experience changing in their conditions due to weather. That could be severe rain, it could be flooding, it could be drought, it could be a series of events, and that places its enormous toll on our road conditions and also plays a role in fatalities. Members spoken here about the ongoing investment, and I really do hope that the country Liberal government continue that investment that has been embedded into the Northern Territory. The current arrangement is 80% of that investment comes from the Commonwealth, 20% comes from the Northern Territory government. That is an incredible investment. That's an investment that not many other jurisdictions around the country have, and that is in recognition that the Territory's ability to raise its own self-generated revenue is extremely difficult, other than the other jurisdictions have a bigger population and ability to raise revenue. The other area I just wanted to touch on, Madam Speaker, that hasn't been touched on tonight, is that many remote people continue to live in abject poverty. They continue to be poor. And we continue to advocate for reforms to community development programs, to social welfare, to job creation, because a large number of issues we see in our remote locations is because our family don't have good cars, because they can't afford good cars. They have cars that might not be built for bush roads, Madam Speaker. I've been out many times visiting my family and my constituents in the electorate of Gwoja, the second largest electorate in the Northern Territory, following Barkly. And I'll be driving in a Land Cruiser, a flash Land Cruiser that's supplied by NT Fleet. And it's a flash car, it's strong, it's good. And next minute, a 1988 Hyundai XL or Ford Laser will just overtake you. And you can look at it and you think, wow, the resilience of our people to remain connected to community and to country is important. But when you unpack that little car is not going to last on those roads, and it could result in that car having mechanical problems where parts of the car fall off at high speeds, wheels, CV joints, ball joints, differentials, they break. Or the car might simply conk out on the side of the road in extreme weather conditions, and the drivers might not have access to drinking water, to a mobile phone, to any of that. So I think there is ongoing work, and I think, as we've heard in this parliament, it's a multifaceted approach to overcoming our road fatalities. And it's not one thing in isolation, it's a group of things happening together. So I think we can all agree it's around education campaigns being rolled out. It's around continued investment on Territory roads to improve the conditions. It's about reminding our Territorians that if you're going somewhere, call ahead, tell someone that you're jumping in the motor car, that you're going to go and visit someone, you're going to a homeland, an outstation, into town, you've got a spare tyre, you've got plenty of water, and if you're at a party or a family cook-up or barbecue or grand final, don't jump in the car with someone who has been drinking. Or if you know someone has been drinking and you know that they drove there, I know it's a hard job, but try and ask them for the keys. Or do everything that we can to stop them from leaving that place after having a few beers. Because it might seem at the time as, oh, I'll be right, she'll be right. But it's not only about yourself, it's about the possible influx that you could have on other people. I think the member for Johnston spoke today about losing a loved one, and I think most of us have lost a loved one due to motor vehicle accidents in the Northern Territory, and I acknowledge the member for Johnston reading the member for Morka's contribution tonight as well, because it is important. A number of motor vehicle accidents, hit and runs, happen in places in our community where there are insufficient street lights, where there's dark spots. And I think that that's work that we can all do. We can work with our local councils on the road networks and improving those, and also making sure that there are good street lights in our community, because they're not only there for a deterrent for antisocial behaviour or to provide a level of comfort for people in our community when they're moving around our community, they're also there when people are driving to ensure that people can see the surrounds on the roads. And that, again, gets back to making sure that our cars are in good condition. Also, driver education programs in remote communities, that's so important. Getting people across how to drive a car proper way, good. And also, when I was the former Corrections Minister, and I hope the Corrections Minister is passionate about keeping this going as well, we were working with CDU around rolling out a driver education program for people in prison, so that if you had been sentenced for a driver-related offence, had you been sentenced for not having a driver's licence, had you had that driver's licence taken away from you for drink driving, that while you were incarcerated, you could have the opportunity to undergo that training, to go for your driver's licence, get your driver's licence, and then when you are released from the correctional centre, you are an authorised, legally recognised driver. And I know that that was work that CDU was embarking on as part of the MOU around the training. But particularly as well in remote communities, years ago, you used to be able to go to the police station and talk to the coppers there, and they'd do your driving test, talk to you and do that work. That's a really important program. And I think I'd need to check with the member for Fanny Bay. There used to be the driving centre where you rode around on your push bike. Still there. Thank you, member for Fanny Bay. And I think member for Araluen, you have the training centre in Alice Springs. These are really great initiatives run by the local community, by the department, around getting on your push bike and teaching our kids the road rules. So I want to just acknowledge that there is good work happening across the Territory. I think that this is a moment where we've all come together to recognise this. We're heading into the festive season. Just remind people to be alert, check your cars, don't drink and drive, and the communication campaigns moving forward. Really encourage that we do this with First Nations media, so that we can have it in local language and that we can continue to work together, see that investment. I know that there's critical investment happening on the Outback Way, which goes through my electorate of Gwoja and the electorate of Namatjura. And certainly there's that rolling investment on the Tanami, new bitumen where it is gravel, and certainly widening that road is incredibly important. Of course, the three top-end roads in Gwoja, the Buntine, the Buchanan and the Victoria Highway, significant investment going in there as well, is incredibly important. But also reminding people around pedestrian crossings and that we do need to be mindful of people and the movement in our local communities. But Madam Speaker, this is an important topic. I do thank all honourable members for their contribution, for the respectful debate and dialogue here around this matter tonight. It's incredibly important. I do thank the Leader of the Opposition for bringing it forward, for enabling us to have that conversation around it. I'm absolutely confident that the Education Department will continue to work in our schools around raising the awareness and the education around road safety, because it is absolutely a critical issue in the Northern Territory. My thoughts and prayers go out to all of the loved ones of the 57 people who have lost their lives on Territory roads this year, and to everyone else, please be mindful and be safe on Territory roads this year, particularly in the wet season. And if you're down in the great part of the Territory, Central Australia, I think it's home to Barkly and Gwoja and Namatjira, where it gets pretty warm down there. Make sure you pack a spare tyre and plenty of water in case you get stuck on those Territory roads, and make sure you call ahead and always tell someone that you're leaving community and that you're going somewhere, so that we know we can send out our hard-working emergency services. Shout out to all our emergency services over Christmas who will be doing an incredible job. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
If there are no more speakers on this debate on the matter of public importance before the chamber this evening, then that concludes the MPI.